Okay, I am joined once again by Edward Hendry, author, lawyer, former Jesuit trained guy. I don't even know how to put that. I don't even know how to put that. And we were talking off air, and I thought, you know what, we might as well hit the button. Edward agreed. I'll be 51 in a week. So I've been around a good chunk of time. I've watched this place change, and I was a NASA fanboy since I was 9 years old. I remember being out in the backyard at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was cold out, looking through a telescope at Saturn. And apparently, much like Edward, when this flat Earth thing came around, I kept thinking to myself, here we go again. Here's another diversion to keep people from looking at the Twin Towers, from looking at the Federal Reserve, from looking at the false flag that started every single solitary war in the United States history. And I just, it's a diversion. It is what it is. But like I said, I've been following NASA and I've watched all the ridiculous stuff. I've watched the bubble show up in outer space. I've watched them accidentally expose themselves in the space station with wires around their waist. You can clearly see them. There's no unringing that bell. And then finally, I got myself a Nikon P900 and then recently a Nikon P1000. When you zoom in on these stars and these planets, to me, it's exactly like looking into a microscope. These things look like plasma. They look like cells. They change colors. They're moving around, and they appear to be in either helium-4 or helium-5, which is a type of a liquid. Edward, what do you think of all that? Does that sound similar to you? Because it took me a lot to actually let go of almost 40 years of what I thought to be true. Outer space. There is no outer space. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right, and your experience parallels very closely my own. So, and I think it's very similar to what other people go through. So, you're born into this world, and you're presented with the propaganda that the Earth is a sphere that's spinning in an empty vacuum of space, and it's now which is careening through the universe in a galaxy, which is in turn careening through the universe at these breakneck speeds. And that's what you've been taught. From the moment you started kindergarten or first grade, you were presented with the globe. And it's really that conditioning is really hard to get over for a lot of people. And once, however, you are able to get over that, and once you realize that your entire life you've been lied to, then these other conspiracies come into bold relief. You then see the players. You then see how they're doing it. You then see the media control. So it's kind of like a child who goes from believing in Santa Claus to realizing they've been lied to. See? And so it's a revelation, and it really does open your eyes to the other conspiracies in the world. This is the mother of all conspiracies. The flat Earth, the concealment of the flat Earth, is the mother of all conspiracies. It is upon that conspiracy that all other conspiracies are pivoted. If they can convince you that what you experience in everyday life is basically wrong, that when you're walking on the face of the earth, that the earth is stationary, and that the earth is flat, just as when you look across water you see it flat. But they can convince you, no, it's actually a big ball, and that you're actually spinning at the equator at 1,000 miles per hour. And then when you look up and you see the stars, and they say, oh, those stars are light years away. A light year being how far light can travel in a year, and light travels at 186,000 miles per second.
Per second.
Per second, yeah. And so, and they tell you these things. And then they can get you to believe something so outrageous so outrageous. All other conspiracies are basically child's play. They can kill a president, and he can have an exit hole in the back of his head. And you can have eyewitnesses who say that there was an exit hole. And you can line them up, and we're talking physicians, nurses, people who saw his body, who said he had an exit hole in the back of his head. And yet, they can convince the people that, no, the shot did not come from the front, it came from the back, from Lee Harvey Oswald, the 6th floor of School Book Depository. They can pull that off, okay, simply by virtue of the amount of power and authority they have over the media. I mean, that, and by the way, conspiracy after conspiracy that you can prove very easily as a lie, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The flat earth, you can prove the earth is flat. All the scientific evidence proves the earth is flat, see? But it doesn't matter because they have control over the organs of the media and education and religion and banking and industry. And so if you were to walk into work and announce that you believe the earth is flat, how long, if you were a teacher, how long do you think you'd be employed as a teacher?
Exactly. We've seen that happen. We've seen that happen in real time with vaccines, with flat earth, with anything, but the flat earth is the toughest one for people to swallow. And let me interject here. I've read some of the comments and videos where I've mentioned the flat earth. I don't come straight out. I've made my point clear. People know where I stand. But people are under the impression, they'd say, Richie, you got to stop watching all those YouTube videos. Well, let me tell you, I didn't make my decision based on what somebody else thought. I went to the top of the mountains in the Colorados. I went to the highest mountains I could get to in the United States. And then from there, I launched a drone another half mile into the sky. And the horizon, every single solitary time without fail, came up to meet the lens of the camera. I live 75 feet from the Atlantic Ocean. There's a rock out in the ocean that's 2 miles offshore. And if you look at that rock standing directly dead nuts at sea level, the horizon, the ocean comes up to meet your eye in the back. I've pulled ships that were gone. They were over the horizon. They were gone. They're on their way to Europe. I've pulled them back with a camera. If the earth was truly round or spherical, none of those things could happen. And then when you start looking at the Michelson-Morley experiments and some of the other science that's buried, you start seeing that this has been an open secret for a long time. We're just the last ones finding out about it. Not to mention the railgun, the military recently released. The railgun would not work at all ever on a spherical Earth. So with that, I digress.
That's right. That's right, because the railgun is electromagnetic.
Boom.
And all electromagnetic waves travel in a straight line. It would not work. It would not absolutely.
It would go shooting off into the sky if it were real, and it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, just to give you an idea, this is very similar to the Loran. Okay, the old Loran that we used to have, which, by the way, all GPS is a fancy schmancy Loran.
Right.
So they call it GPS as though there's some kind of satellite. That's absolutely not true. These are ground-based radio towers that are being triangulated. So that's how you're getting your GPS. And in fact, XM radio and so forth, that's not satellite radio. That's the biggest scam. Those are all from cell towers. They're from towers.
Did you see NASA's video they put out yesterday morning, the 3-minute self-congratulatory video where they kept saying over and over, we've gone to the heavens. They don't say we go to outer space or deep space, or they keep saying we've gone to the heavens. That's a little nod right there. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting that they would use that language. That's
exactly
very
the terminology they used, and I caught it right away. I thought you'd
that's
find
very
that
perceptive. Well, because that harkens back to what Nikita Khrushchev said when he was arguing before the Politburo what they were going to do to gain control or rein in the churches, because they were having a problem with the rising influence of the churches in communist at the time USSR. And his argument was, well, simply tell them we've been to space and there is no God there. It's empty. It's an empty vacuum.
Oh, see, I didn't know that at all.
Oh, yeah. That's the and see, by saying that, he kind of let the cat out of the bag. See, that's what they're doing with this idea of outer space. Every time they send an astronaut to space, or they publicize the ISS in space, or they have people going to Mars, and they make it be known that space is basically an empty vacuum, and it's a very dangerous place, not hospitable. You have to wear a special suit, have special protection, and it's empty. That's the key. It's dark and it's empty. Well, guess what? The Bible says just the opposite. The Bible says that there's a firmament that separates the waters from the waters, okay? And that there's the waters is a water above the firmament, and there's the water beneath the firmament. That's the oceans and the lakes and so forth. And that heaven, where God dwells, his throne, is above the firmament. Well, NASA and all of these space agencies throughout the world say, no, we've been up in space. See, and implicitly saying, in essence, there is no God there. It's an empty vacuum. There is no heaven. And so that falls right in very nicely with their idea of evolution, where we are not created, but we evolved from slime, okay, which, by the way, violates the laws of thermodynamics, where under the laws of thermodynamics, things go from order to disorder, whereas under the theory of evolution, that's reversed. Things go from disorder to order, which is an impossibility.
Well, it's a special type of evolution. It does two things, much like gravity repels and holds down at the same time. You know what I mean?
There you go.
It's a special Freemasonic Jesuit-based science that we're not privy to.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But the thing is, the kids are not taught to think. See, they are taught. They are being conditioned. This is a conditioning process in the school. They're being inculcated. Their values are being changed in the public school. And so in order to get the good grade, they have to regurgitate the lesson. They can't engage in thinking. So, for example, one simple example would blow the theory of evolution out of the water, because the theory of evolution is based on the premise that over a long period of time, see, it takes a long period of time, millions of years, for man to evolve. And so that's why you don't see evolution happening in a couple of hundred years. You need millions of years for things to go from disorder to order. Well, the problem with that is this. Let's say you had your name with one letter written on each separate card. You broke it up, and each card had one letter to your name, and you threw it out your bedroom window. All right? Now, it would be unlikely that as the wind scattered the cards that they would fall to the ground and spell out your name, right?
Right.
That would be unlikely. Well, the theory of evolution says, well, that's because you didn't give it enough time. What you should do is get up in an airplane and throw it out the window of an airplane. Now give it more time, and it will then spell your name when it hits the ground. Well, as you know, it would be less likely to spell your name, not more likely. It'll be more scattered, more chaotic over time, you see. And so what we see in our world around us refutes the theory of evolution. And by the way, we can use the same examples with regard to the flat earth. What we see around us refutes what they say. For example, let me give you an example that anybody can do this themselves and understand the lie that you've been taught. So the moon is supposed to be reflecting the sun, the light of the sun, right? Well, that's what they teach. But let me tell you, for $50, you can go buy, anybody can buy an infrared thermometer. Okay, and you can point it at an area of the ground, and the laser will hit the spot and show you that where you're measuring, and it'll give you the temperature of that location. All right. when the moonlight, you take a I have a cloudless day, and when the moon is shining, if you take the temperature of whatever area it is in the shade of the moon, you'll find that it is actually warmer in the shade than it is in moonlight. That moonlight is actually a cold light. Now, we know that the sun is a warm light. Okay, so if you had the sun out and you take the temperature of an area in the shade, it will be colder than it would be in the sunlight. But it's just the opposite with the moon. Well, the moon cannot reflect a different light than that's coming off the sun unless the moon has its own source of light. It's not really a reflector. That it is its own source of light, just as the Bible says. It is a cold light. It's not reflecting the light of the sun. And so right there we know that the idea that the moon is reflecting the light of the sun is a lie. And by the way, check this out yourself. I've done it. You can do it. Anybody can do it. You'll see that the moon is not reflecting the sun's light. It is giving off its own light, just as the Bible says. It is the lesser light. It is a light, not a reflector.
I found myself, you may have seen this story, but I found myself in the newspapers and tabloids all over the United Kingdom because they were laughing at me that some ridiculous conspiracy theorist in the United States thinks that the moon is only 4.5 miles away. Well, they were misquoting me, of course, but the fact that this video I did got so much attention, it started to make me think that I was on the right track. Mm-hmm. I took a Nikon P900 and I pointed it at a building in Boston that was 4.5 miles away. And then I pointed it at the moon that was up in the sky during the day. I could zoom in on the moon in far more detail than I could the Prudential building, which was only 4.5 miles away from me. And right there and then I started to figure it out, because without the camera, the moon appeared to be about the same size as the building did by eye. But once I zoomed in, I could zoom in on the shadows of the craters on the moon. And for somehow magically it's 250,000 miles away from me. I didn't buy that whatsoever at all. And once you throw in the daytime eclipses when the sun and the moon are in the same spot in the sky, and somehow the sun goes completely dark, it throws away the entire theory that science taught me my entire life, that the earth was getting in the way of the sun and somehow blocking things out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I'm showing the graphics of it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you're talking about the daytime eclipse?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, it's an impossibility. And you'll also notice that the shadow for the daytime eclipse is at the top of the moon.
Right. It makes zero sense.
Yeah.
Then you
go ahead.
You bring up the Michelson-Morley, the interferometer that they used. These guys were trying to they weren't trying to prove anything. They were trying to gather information on exactly what speed the Earth was going, and it's not going any speed at all. And you'd think that scientists would have, they would have spent bazillions of dollars proving the exact speeds, and instead all we have is theories. It amazes me how theories have suddenly become science. They're not tested, they're not provable, you can't redo them in a controlled environment. It's simply and only a theory. Gravity, evolution, Big Bang, all these things. When did that happen?
Well, interesting that the Michelson-Morley experiment basically established that the Earth is stationary. Okay, and it threw the scientific world into a tizzy. So they did this experiment around 1887, and they did not have, because Michelson-Morley. Michelson was probably the foremost physicist of his time. He had an impeccable reputation, and his experiment was impeccably done. He used an interferometer, and they could not refute his results. He published his results. He explained his methodology, and they were scratching their head, and they're going, well, that can't happen if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. It simply can't happen. And so they didn't know quite what to do. And so Einstein came along with his theory of relativity. And Einstein simply postulates the theory that, and he never mentioned, he always tried to avoid mentioning the Michelson-Morley because they could not let it be known that the theory of relativity was being trotted out to address Michelson-Morley, because then the jig would be up. They're saying, oh, this is just a theory to address. So they had to, he actually pretended he was unaware of the Michelson-Morley experiment, which is really hilarious because it was the talk of the entire scientific community at the time. So anyway, Einstein comes up with the theory of relativity, that light can neither increase or decrease. And so the interferometer is based on the difference in speed of light on a moving object, okay? And so when it showed no movement, then that would mean that the Earth is not moving. Well, Einstein simply said, well, that's because if you are on an object, then the speed of that object is relative to your point of observation. And so the Earth is really moving, but it only is perceived by the interferometer as being stationary. It's unbelievable. It's ridiculous. And so people said, well, wait a minute, that can't be true because there's an ether. And if the light is traveling through an ether, it has to show movement, regardless of your perspective. And you know what he said? There is no ether. So by edict, not by any proof, by scientific edict, Einstein got rid of the ether. So think about it this way, light is a wave, and a wave needs a medium through which to travel. So if you think of a wave on a shore, okay, the wave comes in. Now the wave is, you can see the wave because it's moving through the water, right? And you can see the water. Well, that's a wave on the ocean. We have radio waves, you have light waves, lots of electromagnetic energy. It travels in waves, and it needs something to travel through. Otherwise, you can't have a wave. So can you imagine a wave on coming to shore without the water? It would make no sense. And that's what he said. He tried to do. He tried to create light without a wave. And I can remember in school learning about the fact that they didn't know quite how light traveled, which is ridiculous. They knew exactly it's in waves, okay? They tried to say, well, we're not sure if it's waves or particles. Well, they had to say that because by edict, Einstein got rid of the ether. Now, here's the problem with that. The ether has been proven to exist, okay? Sagnac approved that in his experiment. And by the way, even today on aircraft, there are laser gyroscopic compasses that only work if there is an ether. So there has to be an ether for them to work. If there is no ether, they do not work because they function on the same principle, interestingly enough, as the interferometer that Michelson-Morley used. So it's the light shift based on the difference in speed of light in the ether. So isn't that interesting?
It is.
So the very instrument that they use today for compasses is based on the Michelson-Morley principle, which showed that the Earth does not move.
One of the main points that you use in your book, and a lot of people use this because it's a huge deal, is the North Star.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that and remind me that I have a question on the North Star. I just want your opinion on it, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, the North Star is supposed to be over our it's Polaris, okay, and it is due north. It is due north, always due north. Never deviates, okay? But yet we have the Earth, okay, that is traveling at 66,600, interesting number, isn't it? 66,600 miles per hour around the sun, while this North Star, which is many light years away, all right, is fixed, okay, over the supposedly North Pole, what the North Pole of this spherical Earth is, and the sun is also at the same time, okay, traveling through the Milky Way at approximately 500,000 miles per hour. So we have this simultaneously, the Earth going around the sun going through the Milky Way, and the Milky Way itself is also traveling at a speed of between 300,000 and 1,340,000 miles per hour through space. While all of this is happening, the North Star remains fixed many, many light years above our North Pole. Now, is that silly or what?
And there's hundreds and hundreds of videos of real photographers, real professional photographers that are catching the North Star in slow time lapses, and it stays directly fixed in the center.
That's right.
Now, I've seen lots of things moving around in the night sky. I've done hundreds of nighttime videos, especially lately because it's freezing out, but you're getting really good footage. The stars, the planets, everything that NASA shows us, first of all, there is always a disclaimer that it is computer generated. Every time. What we're actually catching with video cameras is what it actually is. These are some sort of energetic plasmatic balls of energy or luminaries that are moving around up there. I've always wondered if the North Star might have been God. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous or not, but it's the only one that doesn't move whatsoever at all. Do you have any idea on that? Have you ever thought about that?
I'd have to do more research, more biblical research on whether stars are angelic beings or not. I know I don't believe the star would be God, and the reason I say that is it's created. So God created the sun and the moon and the stars.
Good answer. Good answer.
And so it can't be God because it's created.
All right. Well, let's go to another one, and now this is a real telltale. And it's the Challenger explosion and the deaths of all of those people that are somehow have identical twins that never spoke at their funerals. That's the big one. If these people truly did have identical twins that are, doctors and lawyers and teachers all over the country that look identical because they're identical twins, why didn't any of these people speak, give the eulogy, anything at their funerals? But they're still alive today. Think about that.
Wow, that is such a brilliant...
Right? I've never made a video.
That is such a brilliant observation, Richie. Oh, my goodness.
Not one of them. That's the story. They have the same names. They have the same facial features, the same space between their bridge of their nose, their eyebrows, the same hair, the same everything. These are identical twins, mind you. The bond between them is closer than any other humans on the planet, but yet not one of those identical twins showed up to give a eulogy or even say a prayer. Nothing.
That is a brilliant observation. And until you said it, I'd never thought of that.
I've never said it before until just now.
Wow, that is brilliant. Now the trick is, all right, let's find evidence of that. You know what I mean?
I've looked. I've spent the last couple of weeks since I started listening to all your podcasts and videos. I've spent the last few weeks, and there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. There should be at least 5 or 6, because the news would fall all over themselves. Oh my goodness, an astronaut died in a terrific explosion. Here's their next of kin, their identical twin, giving their eulogy. Nothing. Zip. Zero.
That is such a good point. But they're gonna, you're gonna have to track down the evidence, and of course now you're proving a negative, which is more difficult. Right. So you have to prove that they weren't there or they didn't speak, which means you'd have to have all of the people that spoke. You'd have to have record of, for example, all of the people that spoke at a given funeral. But that is such a good point, though.
Well, that's why I waited to pose the question to you, because I've looked at your research and it's spot on. It's spot on. You've covered everything, and the way you cover it is really great. I've seen the trolls attack saying that you're a secret Jesuit agent, but according to them, so am I, which doesn't even make any sense to me because I'm Italian. I was Roman Catholic my entire life until on video I was born again. You know what I mean? It happened. I realized that there is a fingerprint of God. I've always been big into outer space, and I've always been big in science. God's fingerprint is all over everything. The Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio shows up in humanity. It shows up in plants, trees, birds, bees. It's everywhere. And yet, evolution, there's no evidence. Anything they show us is a jawbone, and then 6 miles away they found a tooth that they somehow think goes with the jawbone, and it all falls apart. They're hiding God, nothing more, nothing less. And they're doing a really good job of it. They're putting a lot of effort into it, in my opinion.
You're absolutely right. And as far as my book goes, you'll notice that really I am simply relying on the expertise of others. So there are experts who, and by the way, from all areas of the scientific community. So, for example, I've got Herbert Dingle, who was the foremost expert on Einstein's theory of relativity. In fact, he wrote a couple of the standard textbooks for the theory of relativity, who realized late in life that the theory of relativity is untrue and that it is a false paradigm. It is false teaching, and he tried to find answers to his questions regarding the theory of relativity. And so these experts, and by the way, virtually everything in my book is endnoted. So
you've provided evidence. You've provided evidence on every key. That's what I was alluding to. It's amazing how you've backed up everything with the exact proof. You don't do what I do. I put a lot of my opinions out there that aren't backed up by anything except observation. You give the stone cold facts, which is admirable.
Yeah, and the point for that is you have to rely on the authority that somebody brings to the table. So it's not my credibility that comes into play. It's the credibility of my source. So it's almost like an evidentiary hearing. You have somebody on the stand, and they're now testifying to what they saw, to what they perceived, and their credibility. It's not the lawyer who's asking them questions. It's not me who's writing the book. It is, I am telling you what the experts have said. And if you want to question what I'm saying, you can go to my source and you can look at my source. See, people should not believe something just because someone says it.
Right.
They should look at the authority that person brings to the table. Okay, so you can look at, for example, my calculations. I show you my calculations. I compare my calculations to the Pythagorean theorem. I show you how specifically I come to certain conclusions. I show you the source for the photographs, where you can find them. Okay, so I go to NASA. I show you the source for NASA videos, NASA photographs. Okay, so that you can see. If you question my conclusion, go to NASA. Ask them, why are they doctoring these photos? Why are they pasting a picture of the Earth, in a black background to make it look like it's in outer space when in fact it's being pasted there? And I show the evidence and how I came up with that evidence, see? And a lot of this work is done by other people, So again, I've got more than 1,000 endnotes in that book. So when you're looking at The Greatest Lie on Earth, there's a lot of authority behind that. People can go to those endnotes, they can find the source material, and away they go.
And I noticed you put out The Greatest Lie on Earth in 2016, and then in 2018, just back in September, you released an expanded version. Is there more evidence?
Oh yeah, the expanded edition is more than 1,000 pages.
Wow.
So the expanded edition actually goes into a lot of detail regarding the arguments against being able to see things. This is one example. There's a chapter that I've added on light refraction. And one of the arguments that is used by those who in the orthodox scientific community, that they say, well, the reason that you can see things over a long distance is because of light refraction. Well, what I prove, and you can check it out, What I've been able to prove is that actually light refraction, in a typical sense, works against being able to see things at a long distance. That is, it makes things, light refraction makes things less visible over a long distance. And I show that in that chapter on light refraction. And it basically, the only argument they have for the visibility of these landmarks that should not be visible above the horizon, it basically crushes their only argument against it, and that is light refraction. They've got it backwards. They are deceptive. They are being deceptive, and I've caught them time and time again in their deception. And I cite the authorities that say that you can see things. I prove that, in fact, no, that's wrong. Okay.
It amazes me that you can show people the actual paperwork, the redacted paperwork, everything involved with Operation Paperclip, and how NASA was staffed with not only Nazi scientists, but Nazi SS officers that were scientists, and how Disney basically showcased one of them, von Braun, all the time. And then the Bible verse that von Braun's family decided to put on his headstone, where God spreads out the firmament like glass. It's also very telling. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Honestly.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, they take the most deceitful, hated people, the Nazi soldiers, and then they staff, you know, America's beloved, most truthful corporation, NASA. Nobody can do anything because NASA will suck them up. So doing independent research like the Dog Cam did, which I'm showing right now, it's a very rare thing. Anybody that's going to be any good, they're always going to aspire to go to NASA. It's how they keep everything compartmentalized and keep everything quiet. But it seems like the cat's getting out of the bag.
Yeah, NASA is not, it's not actually a space agency. It's an intelligence agency. And the intelligence agencies, the CIA, NASA, NSA, they actually are working to program the population. See, so these intelligence agencies are propaganda arms of the government. And the idea is to control the population. That's what they're there for. That's what NASA's there for. It's an intelligence agency designed to propagandize the people. And you'll notice every time they show a video of these astronauts, it's like the same circus tricks they do every time. Okay, they're having something float in front of them. Basically, hey, looky here, I'm really in space, and they'll do a somersault. Okay, or they'll, you know, it's the most inane, idiotic stuff. The same stuff they do all over again. Basically, me think they protest too much because they do it every time.
Right. The female astronauts are the ones that get me, the women that are in outer space. If anyone's ever been in the military, a woman in outer space, let alone a soldier on the ground, you're not going to let your hair be all over the place. Every single time they make a point of, look, obviously I'm in my outer space. Look at my hair sticking straight up.
That's right. Yep.
If you were in a capsule rocketing around the planet at 17,500 miles an hour, the last thing you would want would be a stray human hair to find its way into a circuit board or anything else. That's a telltale.
That's such a good point, because they're always floating bubbles around the aircraft
all the time. Liquid just floating around the capsule. What could possibly go wrong? Spill a little bit of wine on your keyboard right now and see how that works out.
I know, that is so hilarious. I mean, Apple even has moisture detectors in their motherboards to see if it's been subject to water damage, because water will just kill a motherboard.
Absolutely. Yeah. As will static, as will human hair. It's ridiculous, and people still go for it. And I'm noticing after NASA, I mean, it's amazing to me that, we can't go back to the moon because we lost all that technology and it'd be too painful. It wasn't on the news. It was just a random blurb that one of their more maniacal-looking astronauts put out one day. That was their excuse. We can't go back to the moon because we lost all the information, but just be quiet because we're going straight to Mars. Elon Musk is going to bring us there in his spaceship rocket that can go straight up and then come straight down, no problem. It's laughable. And yet they eat it up. And then Hollywood helps them.
Yep. Yeah, Orwell, in his book 1984, there was a discussion between O'Brien and Winston. Winston was the protagonist in that dystopian novel by Orwell. And O'Brien was explaining to Winston, we control matter because we control the mind. And what he meant by that was basically, hey, the Earth doesn't actually spin at 1,000 miles per hour. But to the extent that we can convince people that it does, we actually control matter. And if in a person's mind they think it spins, then for all intents and purposes, it's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour.
I think of that quote all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
Since you put that out there, that's been stuck in my head for the last few weeks. It's unbelievable. We're living. Science went from being something that can be tested, reproduced, and retested to theories that are now fact, according to Hollywood, according to science, according to the government. It's amazing.
Well, it was Casey who he was the CIA director, and they had a meeting with Reagan at it was a cabinet meeting. And it was like one of the first 2 weeks of his administration. And they went around the table to explain the overall function of their agency and what their goals were. And Casey said that, and he was a CIA director, he said, we'll know we're successful when everything the American people believe is false. See?
Well, we're there. Operation Mockingbird, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Everybody touts the fact that the elites, the powers that be, the Illuminatis, whatever you want to call them, that they, 6 corporations own all of the media. Well, that's old news. That was out about 10 years ago. I would have to hazard a guess that probably 1 or 2 own everything now, because it's all Mockingbird. It's all parroting the same.
Oh, yeah.
Same story every single time. I think they're just waiting for us to die off, because I don't have a lot of faith in the children that are coming up right now, because they're growing up godless. They're growing up with the sodomites being in control of everything. They're growing up with NASA's stories and lies. Elon Musk is going to bring us to Mars. When I was growing up, Mars, we were always taught that Mars wasn't just inhospitable. Mars was poison to humans. It's just no way a human could live on there. Now they're talking about colonizing it, and everyone's going along with it. It's just no big deal. I don't get it.
Well, if you watched a video by Jaron, he does a great job of, he's looking at, I believe it's Google Maps or Google Earth, one of the two, and he's able to actually find what appears to be like a Mars landscape.
Yep.
And he found NASA vehicles, and it's really interesting, fascinating what he was able to uncover.
I watched that when he did it live, and it's like he stumbled right on it. They're right there, the Humvees, all the equipment with NASA's label right there.
Yep. And interesting about Google Earth in and of itself. Understand this, and anybody can do this. You can look at yourself. Okay, so you can check that I'm not making this up. Google Earth is not actually a sphere. Okay, so you're going to look, well, yes, it is, because I pull up Google Earth and I can see it's a sphere. No, it's not. It's actually a computer program that depicts the Earth to look like a sphere, but it's not actually a sphere. And how you can prove that is very simple. Okay, if you take the edge of Google Earth and you move it 180 degrees twice, and you're supposed to, if you do that, that's 360 degrees, right?
Yep.
You should end up in the same spot. You should see the continent facing you that you started with. But in fact, when you rotate it 360 degrees, it does not. Okay? You end up short. I believe it's short of the actual continent. So it is not 360 degrees. If you rotate it clockwise, you'll notice that the continent that's facing you, let's say you take the North American continent, when you rotate it clockwise, that continent will flip to the back. See, so it is not, what it is that is actually a program that they bought. It was a program called EarthViewer that Google bought. And that program, EarthViewer, was actually created by a venture capital firm called In-Q-Tel, which is funded by the CIA. So In-Q-Tel created Earth Viewer, and it was by a company. It's through a company called Keyhole. Keyhole is bought by Google, and that Earth Viewer is what they now use as Google Earth. And basically, what it is a way of depicting. See, in order to be accurate, when they zoom into a street, they have to be accurate, right? Because you're actually looking at landmarks, you're looking at houses. But when they zoom out, they have to transpose it into a globe. So that's what the computer software does. It takes what is essentially the flat Earth, and it creates the appearance of a globe, when in fact, the Earth is not really a globe. Wow. And you can prove that this is actually software that's being used to create a globe appearance for what is really, in reality, the flat Earth.
Unbelievable. I'm going to have to try that. I'm not going to do that right now. Edward,
if you look in my book, I give specific instructions on how to do it. So
perfect,
it's in my book.
Perfect. If you've got any time you can spare later this week or tomorrow or whenever, I'm going to hit you up again. You've already done 2 separate segments for me today. I'm going to let you go because I got to finish what I was doing before we started. But we've covered some phenomenal ground. This will be up live on my main channel in a few minutes. I really appreciate your time. All the links to all of Edward's books will be in the description. I highly recommend getting the biggest lie ever told, the greatest lie on earth. I'm sorry, the expanded version, and it's substantial. You remind me of another researcher, Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6, because he has every annotation, everything he says, he backs up almost fanatically. So I appreciate your time. And anything else you want to say, Edward, before we kill this?
Nope. Thanks, Richie.
Anytime, brother. Anytime whatsoever at all. You've got my number. Hit me up.
Okay.
All right. Richie from Boston, Edward Hendry, greatest lie on earth. We are out.